What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a break from our turbo build to have a little bit of fun. I've wondered what different fluids we could use as oil for quite some time now, and I'm curious which ones are going to work out. So let's get through the intro and go take a look at our test mule. Now that we've gotten through the intro, let's go ahead and take a look at our test mule. So as you guys can see, we have a Craftsman riding mower. We are getting ready to bring this one to the scrapyard anyways, so I figured it'd be a perfect candidate to try these different types of fluids. So let's take a ride to Walmart, pick out a few different things that we want to try, and see which ones this thing can survive. All right, guys, so we're walking through Walmart here. I'm gonna try a few different things for this engine. Got some high mileage Trendz fluid. Let's grab a bottle of gear oil. See what else they got. Get some super clean. We'll have to clean the engine out when we're done, so we'll go with that. What else? Ooh, some power steering fluid. Grab one of those. What else? Some brake fluid. That sounds like a good idea. What else could we run in this thing? Let's take a look around and see if we can find anything else. So we just got back from Walmart and we have our different fluids laid out here. Now the way we're gonna go about doing this test is we will run it with each fluid for about 10 minutes. I'm gonna set a timer, and once 10 minutes goes off, we'll kill it and move on to the next fluid. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with the 85-140 gear oil because I think that one has the best chance of surviving. Then we're gonna move on to some high mileage transmission fluid, which I think is very similar to the power steering that we went with. So after the transmission fluid, we'll move on to the power steering fluid, run those two back to back since they are a similar type fluid. Then we will move on to some DOT 3-4 brake fluid. Once we run this one, if that doesn't kill it off, we will have to clean this engine up. So we're gonna step over to some super clean, and I'm pretty sure that one will do the trick if all else fails. So let's go ahead and get this stuff cleared off. I will fire this thing up to show you guys that it runs perfectly fine with the oil that's in it. And luckily this engine does have a quick drain on the oil drain, so it should make it nice, quick, and easy for us to switch out between fluids. So let's go ahead and get this thing fired up, set a baseline, and then we can start testing out these different fluids. Alright guys, so like I said, it runs perfectly fine with the regular engine oil in it. So let's go ahead, drain it, and try our first fluid. Now that you guys have seen that this thing runs perfectly fine, let's go ahead and drain the actual engine oil out of this thing, and we can start putting the different fluids in it. I do have it tilted a little bit over to this side just so that we can get as much actual oil out as possible. Alright, she's drained enough, so let's go ahead and lock this back up. Now let's get our gear oil and start filling this thing back up. This thing should take about 1.5 quarts of everything. So let's go ahead and start with our gear oil. You guys, let me know down in the comments, which one do you think is gonna kill this thing? You guys think it's gonna make it through the gear oil? Do you think it's gonna make it through all of them? Like I said, let me know down in the comments. This stuff is pretty thick. Oh, filling up the dipstick tube. Working on our second bottle here. Alright guys, so as you can see, she is completely full of gear oil. So let's go ahead and get ready to fire this thing up. There is one more thing that I'm gonna do before we start it, and I'm gonna tie a string to the governor so that if this thing starts knocking or running weird, I can go ahead and pull on that and keep it running and finish it off if it's gonna blow. So let's get that done, then we'll fire this thing up and see how it likes the 85 140 gear oil. Let's start it up with the gear oil. All right, guys, so it made it through its first 10 minutes with the gear oil. I just started to smell maybe a little bit of gear oil towards the end there, but nothing crazy. So let's go ahead and get that drained out of it, and we will move on to transmission fluid. Oh yeah, it definitely looks different than the engine oil. It almost looks like watery when it hits the bucket. Definitely thinned it right out. We'll let that drain for a minute, and then we will move on to the next one. All right, that's the majority of it out. Let's go ahead and close this guy back up. Definitely thinned out with the heat. All right, let's go ahead and throw transmission fluid in this thing. Now we've got our supertech transmission fluid. We're gonna go ahead and pour in 1.5 quarts of this stuff and see what it does with that. This stuff is obviously gonna be way thinner than the gear oil. What do you guys think? You think it's gonna start rapping or making noise with the transmission fluid? Ooh, look at this, look. Nice and full on transmission fluid. Let's go ahead and get this thing fired up. All right, let's fire it up with transmission fluid in it. All right, guys, that was transmission fluid. So let's go ahead, drain this one out, and we will move on to power steering fluid. Had to switch over to my phone for this drain so that we can let the GoPros cool off. One of them overheated on us. But we've got the transmission fluid ready to come out of here. Got our bucket set up. Definitely transmission fluid, definitely changed color a little bit. Super thin. I'm sure that thing was getting pretty hot. Now that all of our transmission fluid is drained out, we can go ahead and close this guy back up again. And now we can get ready to fill this thing up with power steering fluid. Now let's try some power steering fluid with stop leak. Should seal this thing right up for us. So let's go ahead and pour 1.5 quarts of this in. This stuff is super thin, almost clear. See what happens. Oh yeah, she's good to go, guys. I'm sure you can't see it. Even if I zoomed in on it, you wouldn't see it because this stuff's so clear. But let's go ahead and get set up, and we'll fire it up, set the timer for 10 minutes, and see what happens with power steering fluid. So it survived this far. Now we've got power steering fluid in it, and let's see if it can make it through 10 minutes running with that. So let's go ahead and get this thing fired up. Got a little smoke at the end of that one, but I'm honestly surprised, guys. I really thought by now this thing would be smoking or tapping or something, but it might have sounded a tiny bit louder here at the end, but not what I was expecting. So let's go ahead and get the power steering fluid drained out of this thing. We'll throw brake fluid in it and see what happens. Oof. That stuff doesn't look very good. Very hot too, obviously. So at this point, this thing has survived gear oil, transmission fluid, power steering fluid. Now we're gonna move on to brake fluid. Personally, I think this is gonna kill it, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. So let's go ahead and dump 1.5 quarts of brake fluid in this thing. They said DOT4 brake fluids for high temperature. Yeah, she's full now. All right, let's get set up, fire this thing up, and see how it does with brake fluid in it. We've now got this thing full of brake fluid. Let's go ahead, fire it up, and see how it does. I cannot believe that this thing just ran on brake fluid for 10 minutes, no issues. This thing's not even knocking. So let's go ahead, drain the brake fluid out of it, and get this thing cleaned up with some Super Clean. So this thing has survived everything that we've thrown at it so far. So now it's time to clean it out a little bit. So let's go ahead and dump some straight Super Clean in it. We need 1.5 quarts of this, just like we've been running of everything else. This should really help clean this thing out nicely. All right, let's get set up and start this thing and see what happens. Now we've got 1.5 quarts of straight super clean. Let's fire it up and run it. Oh.
I think he just froze.
That was quick. That sucked. Well, that didn't last long. Let's drain it out and put some oil back in it. We're gonna try to get this thing to at least fire back up. We did drain the super clean out, and now I'm just using what leftover bits we had from everything else we tested. So some gear oil, transmission fluid, power steering fluid. So if you ever want to seize one up, just throw some super clean in it. Some more transmission fluid off the shelf. All right, let's try to turn it over by hand and see what it does. That's getting freer. Yeah, we're just, like I said, we were just cleaning it out. All right, guys, so as you've seen yesterday when we were trying out the different oils, we put the super clean in it and that thing locked up pretty much instantly. So that was kind of a buzzkill. So what I did was I dumped some of the leftover fluids that we had, brake fluid, gear oil, and everything else. We dumped what we had left in it, got the level back up, and I let it sit overnight, cool back down, and I tried turning it over with a breaker bar. Yesterday, it was pretty tight. I just went out there right now and tried it, and it loosened up quite a bit. So I'm gonna grab the jump box. We're gonna go out there, see if we can't get this thing to fire up again and see what it does. So yesterday, this thing was seized right up. We let it sit, and now it does turn over. Not as good as it should, but pretty good. So we'll fire it up and see if it runs. So we've tried running this thing with every fluid that we had. So now let's try no fluid. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and leave that open while we start it up. So we're letting whatever oil is in this thing drain out as we speak. So let's go ahead and fire it up while it drains and see what happens. think she's finally dead, guys. Finally. So as you guys seen, we were finally able to kill that thing. I couldn't believe how long it held in there, and all the stuff that we put it through, it just kept on going. It made it through all of the fluids that we tried except for the super clean. That one seized it up instantly, but as you guys seen before, we were able to drain that out, let it cool overnight, and that thing fired up like nothing had ever happened and ran great. Then I was pulling on the governor, I held it wide open. It would go up to what I believe to be valve float, smoke out of the exhaust and the intake, idle down, and then rev right back out again like it didn't even care. And it just kept doing that. I did it for quite a while that I didn't even put in the video because it just kept going. So I was super impressed with how long that thing held in there, especially with the concoction of different fluids that we tried, and then at the end just making a cocktail of all of them. So super impressed with how long that thing held in there. The only way we were finally able to kill it was to drain all of the oil and just hold that thing wide open, and it finally did chuck a rod. It didn't exit the block, but you could definitely hear it banging around in there. No compression or anything left in that thing. So it was kind of a fun little experiment to play around with today. I'm very surprised that the brake fluid didn't kill it. I thought that the thinness of those fluids would knock that engine out, but it didn't. And the brake fluid in general, I just thought was going to kill it, but again, it didn't. So I was super impressed with that. If you guys want to see any other videos like this where we just have a little bit of fun and test different things out, make sure to let me know your guys' ideas down in the comments below. I always read through them, and if it's something that I can do, I'll be more than happy to do it and have some fun while doing so. So as always, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell. And check us out on all of our other social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one.